Hello everyone and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by LawSikho. So these are the articles that we will be discussing today. Firstly, the Great Graying of China. Basically, it talks about the one-child policy that China had been following till date. But then, what are the major implications of this policy and how the population of China is there to be growing at a very fast rate, as in the terms of age. So we'll be discussing that in detail. Secondly, censorship before a show, the law rulings. So as very recently, there were a lot of controversies regarding one of the TV shows that had to be telecast from Sudarshan TV. So we would be discussing about that and what was the stance of the courts in this particular scenario. And thirdly, news and flash, wherein we'll be discussing the small and crisp pointer news, which are specifically more important for the prelims exam. Before that, let's have a look at the LawSikho courses that we have for you. So we have the Lord of the courses, which is the Judiciary Test Prep course. The link to this course is there in the description box. So if you are also preparing for the judicial services, you can definitely get yourself enrolled into this. From the landing page itself, you can also download the free study material, which is very amazingly drafted for all the aspirants. You can have a look at various other courses of LawSikho as well, which are available on our webpage. So let's see that what is the multiple choice question that we have for the day. Who has recently been chosen as the chairperson of National School of Drama? Firstly, Nasruddin Shah. Second, Anupam Kher. Third, Paresh Rawal. Or fourth, Boman Irani. So if you know the answer to this question, do jot it down in the comment section below. Let's see that what is the descriptive question for the day. An unchecked speech can have detrimental effects on the social harmony of any society. Discuss in detail the constitutional provisions relating to free speech and the reasonable restraints, if any. So basically, we hope that you must have understood as to which article of the Indian Constitution I'll be talking about in here, and also the reasonable restrictions that are attached to this particular right. The answer to this question must be written within a word limit of 250 to maximum 300 words. You may also jot it down in the comment section below. With this, let's quickly start with the discussion for the first article for the day, which talks about China's aging population and economic growth. Basically, China's 1979 policy, which was the one-child policy, had introduced to curb the population and seek popular support for Chinese Communist Party, which might result in harming the economic development of the country. Basically, as we know that even till date, China still stands to be the country which has the highest population in this world, and India, has the second largest or second highest population in the world. Since 1979, one-child policy, which in short is also known as the OCP, it was brought into China, and even till date, it is being used, though some relaxations have been brought in, but still it is very vigorous and very rigorously used in China, and still the population of China is it amounts to be one of that is the highest in the whole world. But then again, we need to understand as to what were the benefits in the first place and what were the major implications or the cons, or to say the demerits that actually China has to face due to this one-child policy. Firstly, when we crisply would like to discuss about the benefits, so obviously we know that having a control on the population, China made it really easy for itself to actually bring in various policies and to control the population in a very handy manner. Secondly, it could definitely train its individuals in a more effective manner, and the skill development could be done more effectively as the people or the population was controlled comparatively. But then again, this article specifically focuses more on the implications, as in the negative impacts that actually will be coming. In some situations, they already are existent in China, and some are to come into the near future. Before we discuss that, let's see that how this entire discussion is holding any kind of relevance to India. So almost in 1980s, that was almost a similar time, India also had come up with a quite similar policy, but yes, it was not for one child thing, but in 1980s, the very slogan or the social motto of Hum Do Hamare Do, that is we and we too and two further offsprings of ours. So that meant having a constraint on 2 children per couple. So Hum Do Hamare Do was a very popularized slogan through mass campaign, and through this the government wanted to give the message of having a smaller family that was well planned and had only 2 children at maximum. Then private member bills to control the population had also been brought into picture. As Prahlad Singh Patel in 2016, he was one of the members of the legislation, and the Shiv Sena MP Anil Desai in 2020 recently also gave this private member bill. Then in 2017, Assam became the first state in India to introduce two-child policy in the government jobs. So in a way, we also, in some or the other way, with some differences, with some nuances, are actually moving on in some of the other kind of similar policy like the one-child policy. Because obviously, the population burst in China was very, very huge. And to control that, they had to come up with nothing but the one-child policy. But in India, we still have this buffer, and that is why we were focusing much upon having only 2 offspring. But yes, a leeway of 2 was allowed. Even though this is not any legislation or a very hard and fast rule that has to be followed, because obviously there are several of families who have children more than 2 in number. But yet, a recommended thing, something that the government wanted to promote and is still trying to promote, is the slogan of Hum Do Hamare Do. But then let's understand that how this one-child policy has failed to quite an extent in China as well. Firstly, average birth rate in China fell to 1.6 births per woman in 2017, and this was below the replacement rate of 2.1, due to which fewer females were born. We'll discuss that into the next slide as well. Then the China's population aged above 65 would increase from 10% in 2010 to 32.6% in 2050. Which means when the census of China's population would be done in the year of 2050, which is exactly just 30 years after it, we would have 32.6% of China's entire total population to be the aged people. That is, the old people would be forming 32.6% of the population, which is almost half of the population, and a very, very huge number. And if we compare this to India, so the aged population in India in 2010 as compared to China was only 5.6%, where China had it 10% already. And then even in 2050, India would have it only shot up to 14.2% as compared to 32.6% in China. And almost a similar numbers are there with United States of America as well. So despite the raising of limit to 2 children in 2016, number of newborn has not improved. So basically, after 2016, some kind of relaxations were given in China, and the people or the families were now allowed to they're allowed to have 2 children per family. But due to even after bringing this policy as well, the number of newborn has not really improved in China. Now let's see majorly that what are the implications that are attached to this aging population. Firstly, there will be definitely an increased expenditure on the health, social welfare, and the pension. Because obviously we know that when we have a population that is aged, and the greater number of population is aged as compared to the youth population, there is more of investment needed in the areas of health, because obviously there are a lot of health related issues that would arise in the old age people. And then of course for their social welfare, like maybe some kinds of good homes, other kinds of benefit or welfare schemes, and pension as well. So currently, as the population is comparatively youthful in China, all of them can reap a lot of benefit and economic gain to China. But just after 30 to 40 years from today, this scenario will completely turn the table, and more of investment would be needed instead of more of generation of wealth. And obviously due to this, there will be a decrease in the saving rate, because obviously now we'll have to, as in China will have to spend more into these sectors to keep the people healthy and secure. And there will be decline in the manufacturing and exports as well, because obviously it is the youth that actually engages into these activities of manufacturing and exports. And when the population of youth will automatically come down, so obviously the manufacturing and exports scenario would also lower down. And this ultimately would result into the lower revenue and weaker economic stance. Thirdly, one-child policy children are often unfit for armed forces. Basically what happens is that, firstly, just imagine that a family has gotten only one child. Firstly, they would definitely, like, there would be rarest of the families who would like to actually put up their children into the army, because they have so much to lose now. That this is the only child in their whole family, and if they also put it up at the risk of putting into the army, definitely it will be a huge risk for the family, because then they would be left with nobody to take care of them in the future. First thing first. And secondly, what happens is that many a times the children who are brought up into very pampered situations, and also the situations wherein they have grown up alone, various spirits that are actually required for being into army, for example, being a team player, team spirit, and even the physical fitness, they lack significantly into the children that are born out of this one child policy. And that is why this will be one of the biggest brunt that China would have to face, because they would have either none, or if at all they would have unfit men or unfit people or unfit candidates for their armed forces. Fourthly, reduction in intellectual exchanges and innovations. Now, basically, many studies have revealed that wherever there are less of people, the intellectual exchanges or the intellectual dialogue amongst the people is very less, and due to which the innovation does not come up really well. And that is why, if the population of the youthful people in China would lower down, so this intellectual exchange or dialogue and also the innovations would also reduce down. Fifthly, deteriorating sex ratio. Now, how actually do we understand this point as to how one child policy actually is leading, in even in the current scenario, leading to the deteriorating of the sex ratio? Firstly, let's understand that what do we actually mean by sex ratio. Basically, in general terms, it refers to the total number of females per 1,000 males in a particular scenario. So, for example, if there are 800 females for every 1,000 males, and if you try to put one female for one male, 200 males would be considered extra. Or if we say it in the other terms, 200 females are less as compared to the number of males. So ideally, the best situation is considered when the sex ratio is something that falls to 1, as in the number of females is absolutely or very, very closely similar to the number of the males as well. Let's take this case for China. Just like India, like we have a patriarchal society, and even till date, in many rudimentary and various households, a boy child is considered or is preferred over a female or girl child. And that is why actually the activities or the criminal activities of female feticide and infanticide were very prevalent, due to which obviously the sex determination before delivery has actually been banned in India. Almost a similar scenario occurs and is existent in China as well. Even there, the norms of the society favor and prefer more the male child as compared to the female child. So just imagine that if you have the choice, you have got no choice, and you only are allowed to have one child. And in such scenario, if you are a patriarchal society and you believe in the differences between a boy and a girl, who would you be choosing for having to be your one and only child? Obviously, most preferably, such people would be choosing a boy to be their own child and the only child, basically. And this has actually led significantly to the deterioration of sex ratio in China as well. Sixthly, declining total factor productivity. Basically, total factor productivity refers to as in that how much can one particular individual produce in totality. So basically, this is done, many times it is done on a daily basis as well. So what are the reasons as to the decline of TFP would occur? Like, no market reform on the ground would be occurring, because opening of services, banking, insurance, etc. would come down. Then no improvement in governance, as 68% in the WTO's government effectiveness is the rank which actually is allotted to China, and 77th rank is allotted in the annual corruption perception index, which is given by Transparency International. So the governance system already is not really very good in China, and it is further expected to deteriorate once this one-child policy further opens up. And thirdly, big variations in high school pass rates. Basically, what we need to understand here is that China can be taken as one of the precedents for our two-child policy as well. And if at all India formally wants to bring in the two-child policy, then we should definitely keep these points in mind as well, because currently India also is considered to be as the youth nation of the world, as broadly speaking, almost 60 to 65% of India's total population falls in the category of youth. And that is why India is known to be a youthful nation, and that we are in a very good situation to reap the benefits of a demographic dividend. And if at all we think of bringing policy as similar to the one child policy of China, we must be very, very sure about the impacts and implications that it has attached to it. With this, let's discuss the second article for the day, which talks about pre-censorship or prior restraint. Currently, different courts have conflicting ruling in relation to the broadcast of two shows. Firstly, Sudarshan TV's Bindas Bowl show and Netflix documentary Bad Boy Billionaires. Let's see them turn by turn. So what was the case with the Sudarshan TV's Bindas Bowl? That the trailer of this, actually the trailer of this entire episode, it said that it would expose the so-called conspiracy to infiltrate Muslims in government service. As very recently, the results for the UPSC Civil Services exam had come up, and it was like a lot of Muslim candidates could actually also make it to the top rankers or the top of the list. This was somehow brought into some communal way, or let's just not interpret it into any way, and it was somehow presented to be as one of the conspiracies to infiltrate Muslims. For basically, this term to bring in infiltrate is also very negative in the first place, and to bring in Muslims into government service. And this entire program had the this centralized idea of discussing upon this idea. But here, the Supreme Court refused to stay the broadcast, and it observed that the court has to be circumspect in imposing prior restraint on publication. Competent authorities are vested with powers to ensure compliance. And basically, the Supreme Court said that putting a prior restraint would be actually detrimental to the fundamental right of speech and expression. Whereas, on the contrary, Delhi High Court granted an interim injunction relying on Section 5 and 19 of the Cable Television Network Regulation Act 1995. So here again, a conflict was seen as to Delhi High Court had put up a stay on the broadcast of this program, whereas Supreme Court refused to stay any kind of broadcast. Now then, in the second case, which was about the Netflix Bad Boy Billionaires documentary, Delhi High Court refused to grant a stay, and it stated that the petitioner was personally affected by the broadcast, and therefore it would be even better to have a civil suit coming up that would be the appropriate remedy. Whereas, again, on the contrary, the court in Bihar's Araria passed an interim order staying the release. So basically, a lot of controversy and conflict is being noticed, wherein one court has some kind of opinion regarding the similar issue, and the other court has absolutely opposite opinion regarding the same issue. Let's understand that what actually do we mean by prior constraint. So it means prohibiting the exercise of free speech before it can take place, because obviously it means prior. So some restraint that comes beforehand. Just like we have the idea of preventive detention, that we try to detain a person who we think is capable enough, or he has the potential to cause some kind of disturbance or might do some kind of criminal activity. And that is why, to prevent that, in a preventive manner, we detain that person. Almost on the similar line, prior restraint means when we try to restrain some kind of content or some kind of speech delivery at a prior hand, and this imposition of pre-censorship or prior restraint is actually violative of Article 19, Clause 1. But then again, there are always exceptions, because as we know that there is no fundamental right in our constitution that is absolute in nature, and there are some or the other kind of reasonable restrictions attached to them. So the exception being reasonable restrictions under Article 19 Clause 2, and as we know that there are various kinds of grounds that are available under Article 19 Clause 2, and if the court or the authority believes that any of those grounds would be met if such thing would be broadcasted or brought into the public domain, then such thing can be priorly restrained. So the word reasonable was added in the first Constitutional Amendment Act after Romesh Thapar versus State of Madras and Brij Bhushan versus State of Delhi. So this is also a good crisp point you should always remember, because you should know that when this term reasonable was actually added. Now, the speech can be restricted only when judged on its actual content and not the preemptively based on perceptions. Just like in the case of the Sudarshan TV broadcast as well, because that was only merely 49 or 50 seconds It was a promo kind of a video, and the Supreme Court also said that just by viewing the promo, we cannot entirely understand that what is the context of the whole show or episode, and that is why a prior restraint cannot be allowed on such a broadcast. And there must be a test of proximity that must take place, which states that state is required to demonstrate a proximate link between public order and speech, and it should be able to develop this relation that if this kind of speech or this particular speech is actually broadcasted, it would definitely have a potential of, disturbing the public order. And if it is able to pass this stress test of proximity, then a prior restraint can be allowed. So with this, we are done with the greater or the bigger or major articles. Let's discuss what do we have with the news in flash. Firstly, drawdown in Iraq. So basically, this is one of the articles that were there in the editorial page of the Hindu today, but it majorly did not have very, something really very much to be discussed about, and that is why one major development was there. So we thought to put it up in the news in flash column. So basically, the United States has announced to cut troops from 5,200, which is the current number, to only 2,000 in Iraq. Now, as we know, that the American army has been deployed into various countries, like, for example, Iraq, and also we know Afghanistan. So currently, as we also know that when Donald Trump was actually campaigning for his presidentship, like years ago, when he actually was proclaimed as the president of America, he had promised to the common people that he would bring back all the American troops or American army or soldiers back to the mainland, and they would not be further deployed into any other foreign country. So maybe because we know that November elections are going to be there in November in the United States. So maybe this is one of those acts that he's trying to do, maybe. But then the growing public opinion in Iraq, they actually obviously are not very supportive of the US troops, and they just do not like it. And it might also be a US's policy to bring back American troops home. Secondly, Golden Temple gets the FCRA registration. Basically, FCRA registration is the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, and any association, NGO, or a registered society requires the FCRA registration to receive foreign donations. Now, since Golden Temple has gotten the FCRA registration done, it can now receive various kinds of donations and impetus or any kind of support, financial support from foreign donators or foreign countries as well. Thirdly, India and Japan signed logistics agreement. So the agreement will allow the armed forces of both the nations to coordinate closely in services and supplies, increase the interoperability, which means that they will be able to operate very more in a smoother manner between armed forces, and assist in maintaining regional security. So you must remember that with whom or which country has India recently signed this logistics agreement in the armed forces? So it is Japan. Fourthly, California wildfires. Now, as we know that due to the drying up of the forest, even of the evergreen forest, just we very recently knew about the Amazon forest in Brazil, which is there in South America, and also the Australian bushfire. Now, another fire that is very much into news is the California wildfire. So it is in the California Sierra National Forest, and it actually exploded in size and spread over 24 kilometers in a single day. So wildlife in Plumas National Park, it spread 40 kilometers in a day. So basically, due to drying up of these forests only, these wildfires are occurring in California as well. Now next, India-China agree on 5 principles to resolve the standoff. Now, since we know that since a lot of time now, it's been almost 3 months now that there is a standoff between India and China in Ladakh and various other strategical points over there. So now 5 principles have been agreed upon. It includes abiding to all existing agreements and protocols, maintaining peace and tranquility, and avoiding any action that could escalate the matter. So we really hope that something good is very soon achieved through these talks. Next, Paresh Rawal appointed the NSD chair. Now here comes your answer probably, that he has been recently appointed as the president or the chairperson. It's basically the president by the President Ramnath Kovind. Paresh Rawal is now as we know, he is an actor and also a former BJP MP from 2019 to 14 from Ahmedabad. So of the National School of Drama, he has been appointed the chair or the chairperson. And next, Prime Minister Modi launched Matsya Sampada Yojana in 21 states. Basically, as we know that Matsya is the fish, or in Hindi we also call it as the machli. So Matsya simply is a Sanskrit term for fish. So basically, Matsya Sampada Yojana has been launched in 21 states, wherein an effort to promote fisheries in the country, because we know that it is also one of the sectors that can be very, very leading for gaining good GDP and exports as well. So it will be able to double the fish exports in the next 3 to 4 years. So its budget is over rupees 20,000 crore. So this was all for today. We hope it was a good session for you. Thank you so much for being there with LawSikho. We hope that you stay with us, and yes, good luck to all of you.